Algebra 1, Lesson 6, and we're going to look at Lesson 7. So Lesson 6 is all about subtracting real numbers, basically taking the ideas from adding real numbers and changing our subtraction problems to addition problems. So if we jump right in, the first thing about this is thinking about opposites, because that's going to help us as we are subtracting, because we will need to know what the opposite of a number is. And basically with opposites, we need to think about how far away it is from 0. Basically, its absolute value. So if we take a number, figure out how far away it is from 0, its opposite is also that far away from 0. So some examples of opposites are things like 3 and -3. Those are the same distance away from 0. Or 10 and -10. Those are the same distance away from 0, so we call them opposites. The other name for them, though, is additive inverse. And the reason is because of this property right here, the inverse property of addition. If we take a number a and add its opposite, or the additive inverse, we will always get 0. So a good example of this is 5 and -5. When we add those together, we get 0. All right. Moving right along with rules for subtracting real numbers. Honestly, what we are going to do is create an addition problem for this. So to subtract a number, add its inverse. And then we just need to add the numbers. So for example, if we start with the question 3 minus 5, we can change that, basically take that subtraction sign and turn it into an addition sign, and then take the opposite of 5. Well, the opposite of 5 is now -5. So we add its inverse. Well, by that point, then we just have an addition problem of 3 plus -5, and we can easily say, well, that's -2. Okay, so for a couple of these examples, let's look at -12 minus 21. We change the subtraction to addition, and we make 21 its opposite of -21. Now we can just add these two to say we get -33. How about this one, 3.2 minus a -5.1? Well, whenever we see that double negative, we can actually think, well, two negatives right in a row, subtraction and a negative sign in front of the 5.1, will make it into an addition problem, because we add the opposite of 5.1, which is positive 5.1. And we just have an addition problem here, and we get 8.3. This will work with any subtraction problem, and it makes our life a whole lot easier by being able to add things rather than subtract things. So just a couple examples of this from some word problems. Let's look at this one about Mount Whitney and Death Valley. So if we take Mount Whitney, it's the highest point in California at 14,494 feet above sea level. So if we're talking about above sea level, that means that we have a positive number, 14,494. Now, if we look at Death Valley, we are saying that that's 282 feet below sea level. If it's below sea level, then we're talking about a -282. The question is, the floor of Death Valley is how many feet below the peak of Mount Whitney? Really what it's asking for is, what is the difference between these two numbers? And if you recall, difference in math means that we need to subtract. We want the space between these two. Well, we see we have a subtraction problem, so we can change that subtraction to addition, and then also, sorry about that, we can change the subtraction to addition, and then change that negative sign to a positive sign. Okay, we add the inverse. All right, let's put that up there. We add, we're almost there. There we go, add the inverse. So really what we get is 1,776. All right, so a subtraction problem into an addition problem. Okay, let's keep going. Let's look at one more example of this. All right, so if we look at this one about a bird and a fish, we want to know the distance between the two. Well, the bird is flying 6 feet above the water, and the fish is underneath the water by 5 feet. Well, if we were to create a problem with this, we would say, I have a bird that's flying positive 6 above, and a fish that is negative 5 underneath. We want the distance, we want the difference between the two, so we subtract. Really what we're going to do is add the opposite. So we get they are 11 feet apart. Okay? So being able to subtract is really just changing it into an addition problem to make your life a whole lot easier. Let's go on to lesson 7. So lesson 7 is thinking about symbols of inclusion, and some very common symbols of inclusion are things like parentheses, or brackets, or braces. And another one that doesn't get talked about a lot with symbols of inclusion are absolute values. Okay? All of these are symbols of inclusion, and based on PEMDAS, our order of operations, parentheses come first, and all of these symbols of inclusion are contained in that idea of parentheses. So let's look at some examples of this. 9 minus the absolute value of 4 minus 6. And then we have 5 times 2 plus the quantity of 3 plus 6 minus 8. All right, let's look at the one with absolute values first. Well, absolute values are a symbol of inclusion, so we need to do what's inside first. And that's a subtraction problem. So we get 9 minus the absolute value of negative 2. Now we can do the absolute value of negative 2 and get that we have 9 minus 2. Well, now it's just normal subtraction and we get 7. Over here with our other one, we need to start with those brackets. But inside the brackets, we see that we have parentheses. So we always start there. Whenever you're inside of a parentheses, a brackets, a braces, you start order of operations over and look for those parentheses again. So we see that we get 5 times 2, that doesn't change, plus 3 plus negative 2. Okay, now we can do the brackets and get 3 plus a negative 2, which is just 1. All right, we're going to add that 5 times 2. Now, because of order of operations, we need to make sure that we multiply first, so that we get 10 plus 1, and so our answer is 11. All right, so do those braces and brackets first. Let's just do one more example. 3 plus 5 times the quantity of 9 minus 3 squared minus 6. Okay, and this parentheses shouldn't be there, so disregard that. Okay, so we need to look in those brackets and we see another pair of parentheses, so we do that first. So we copy down what isn't going to change, and we can simplify inside the parentheses and we get 6. We're going to need to square that, minus 6. Okay, we look in the brackets and see, well, there are exponents in there, so I need to do that first. So we do 3 plus 5 times 36 minus 6. And then we have to still be in the brackets. 36 minus 6 is 30, so we do 3 plus 5 times 30. Now it's really easy to be looking at this 3 plus 5 on the outside and want to add it right away. But we can't, because 5 is multiplied by the bracket. So we have to do everything in the bracket, then multiply by 5, and then we get to add it. So we can now do 3 plus 150. Now we get to add with a final answer of 153. Okay? Symbols of inclusion, we must do those first with order of operations. If there are multiple sets, we have to look and see, all right, if it's inside of the bracket, I have to do those parentheses first. All right? I hope this is helpful for homework and for studying.